Hello, in this video, we're going to go over how to set some base points, basically the origin, and to establish new coordinate systems so that you can measure like the center of mass of your assembly as may be asked for in the CSWA exams. First things first, just so that you know, this assembly is kind of randomly placed in space. Now, if I actually come up here where the eye is hanging into my um, area and I turn on the origins, you'll notice the origins for the various parts themselves do come up, but I also have this random origin floating in the background. That is the origin of the assembly itself. I can tell that because if I click on the origin, you can see that is the point that is selected. So that's where the origin itself is. If you wanted to put your assembly on the origin such that the point here is in a known relatable place, what you can do is, and you would typically do this before you put all the rest of the parts in. We would have done this with the base at the beginning. But instead of remaking the whole thing, we're just going to go ahead and do it at this point. So I'm going to right click on the base that says F where it is fixed. And one of my options down the road is float. And once I float it, you'll notice my assembly went to being underdefined. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to use my mates command to actually move this so that the origin is at the lower right hand corner, this point right here. And the way to and is fully defined. So the way to do that is just know that the origin point is actually where the front, the top, and the right plane all come together. Now, in order to put that on this bottom corner, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually mate some of these faces to the planes that they are closest to. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on mate in my assembly one. You should be doing this as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open my assembly parts. I'm going to click the front side of this base, and I'm going to click the front plane, and I'm going to make them coincident. You'll notice for me it moved back. For you it might move forward. Not quite sure exactly where it'll move for you, but that's okay. I am going to click the right side of the base, and I'm going to click the right plane, and I am going to make them coincident and accept that. The last one is the only one where the names don't match. I'm going to click the bottom side of this base piece, and I'm going to pick the top plane. And once I do that, you can see that the origin of the assembly. So if I click the origin here, you'll notice that that point is now in the bottom corner of this. What that means now is that based on how I set my mates, okay, my distance A or my angle B, when I look at evaluate and mass properties, my center of mass is now something that is comparable because the center of mass you can see is this pink XYZ point right here. And the values here are the X, Y, and Z measurements to get there from the origin. So if I change the origin point, okay, that would change those numbers, even if my location stays the same. So we're judging this based on the default coordinate values, okay? And you'll notice that is the only option right now. That is based on the assembly origin, okay? So I'm going to close that. Now, that's great and all, but what I can do also is I'm going to turn that off, and there's another one that allows me to view coordinate systems. And as you can see, when I turn that on, I don't see any. I don't see any coordinate systems right now. That's because there haven't been any created. The next part, and this may be easier in some people's mind, is I'm going to go to my assembly, and I am going to go to my reference geometry right here, and I am going to create a new coordinate system. Now I'm going to first position where the point is. It's nice if you have an actual point. It does show you where the current one is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on this corner. Now I'm going to put it there. Now what it wants you to do is it wants you to click some lines that are in that direction. So right now it's highlighting on x-axis, which is usually our side to side or our measurement from left to right. So this line goes in the x direction, and you can see the red arrow points there. Okay. My y-axis goes up and down. So if I click this line here, I can use the tools here to flip the direction. So as you can see, I want my y-axis pointing up, and I want my z-axis pointing out. Once I've defined those, I can go ahead and click the z-axis. Now, it should already be set there. And when I do that, I can accept it. And what you'll now see is I have now have coordinate system 1. You can see it's visible because I already showed them to be on. I can turn them off so they're not showing. Okay, but since I just since I just created it, it will show. It's also a feature here, so you can click on it to see it as well. You can see where the X, Y, and Z go. You should also make sure that those are true for whatever it shows you, because sometimes when when you have to set a coordinate system up, it'll show you this, and you might actually see that Z is up and Y is forward, or one of the arrows is not pointing in a standard direction. And while that won't affect the number measurement, it may affect the positive or negative value of it. Okay. So how do I use that now? Well, I didn't change anything. So you would assume that if I go to evaluate and I go to mass properties, that these numbers have changed, and they haven't, because I'm measuring from the default. I'm measuring from the origin of the assembly. I now, though, have an option. If I drop this down, I can pick measure based on coordinate system 1. And you see now all of my values changed, because now I'm measuring where is this point, but now I'm measuring from this top corner, not that lower corner. Okay. Now, for the questions that follow this in the activity to practice with that, first off, you should have followed along with this video, setting the origin at this corner point and coordinate system 1 at this point. Based on those, you will be asked questions of, if I set my B distance to whatever, or I set my A angle to whatever, what is my center of mass? And the thing to pay attention to is, if they're asking you based on the assembly origin is the term that will be used, that'll be this point right here. If they say based on coordinate system 1, that's using this point up here as your point to measure from. All of them will be asking for XYZ values, and all of them will be asking you to type them in millimeters. Make sure your assembly is working in millimeters. But to make sure to type the number up to 2 decimal places and no units. Okay, so follow all directions on those questions.